You're now listening to the Open Africa podcast with Laolu, Nosa, and Furo. On this episode of the Open Africa podcast, we have a guest with us. And we have Angie Jones, the Global Vice President of Developer Relations for tbD, to talk to us about their hackathon that they're launching soon. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So Angie, would you like to just briefly share a bit more about yourself and tbD?
Yeah, sure. I'm Angie Jones. I'm the Global Vice President of Developer Relations at tbD, which is a business unit of Block that's focused on open standards and open source software, specifically around identity verification and financial services.
Awesome. Thanks for that quick introduction. So when you talk about tbD, for the listener that's not necessarily very technical, would you be able to break down what that means for them?
Yeah, sure. So financial services is what we do, but tbD specifically is focused on making that open. So most of the financial services that we know today, you don't understand the code itself or the things behind it. You can't look at it. It's pretty much controlled by whatever company made it. At tbD, we're doing something different where we're building these products and protocols and services out in the open. They're open source, meaning that anyone can look at the code behind it. Anyone can make a copy of the code and tweak it for their own needs. Anyone can contribute to the product itself, via open source software development. And we can include the voices and the contributions from anyone in the world. So we're looking at this as like this basically like an open protocol that we don't own, we don't control. We're leading the development around it, but everyone and anyone can contribute to it.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that explainer. Laulu?
I guess, yeah. I guess for me, the question is for like the average bloke out there who, has a bank account, probably even dabbles into cryptocurrency a bit. The question is like, why should I care about, you know, um, owning my own identity, or being a part of this because like I seem to be doing well so far. Like I input account details and the money goes where it's supposed to go. And when people send me money, it gets to me as well. Like why? I guess the summary of the question is why is this important?
Yeah. So for global payments, it's much more challenging, right? So, for example, I went to Nigeria last year from the U.S. and I this was my first time in the country, and I wanted a local videographer there to capture my visit. And so I booked him in advance and I sent the payment to him, via a bank transfer because there was no app that would allow me to send him this payment instantaneously. And so I sent it via bank transfer. A week or so passed before my trip. I flew to Nigeria. He did a beautiful job capturing the visit. I flew back home to the US and the payment still had not arrived in his account. This is
Wow.
ridiculous for this to be so slow and to take so long. And I'm having to basically prove to him that I even sent it. I don't want him to think I'm trying to con him or something like that. And, so it took several weeks for him to get that payment. Why are global payments so slow? Not only that, let's talk about the fees and things that are associated with them. And they're expensive because there's several intermediaries that are operating as middlemen, to get your payment. That's why it's so slow. That's why it's fees. Each one of them are taking a cut along the way. And so what we're proposing is a way for payment applications to connect directly to financial institutions so that they can move money across borders without so many stops and so many middlemen along the way. So for the end user, they don't even need to know about all of that. All they know is that now the money is moving faster and
Fair
it's
enough.
costing them less to get it there.
Fair. That's fair.
So I'm a bit curious, because I know Block also does Cash App and Square.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess I wanted to understand how these two missions kind of align, like with what Cash App's trying to do. Like, is Cash App going to get on the platform if they're not, like get on the protocol if they're not, or is this just going to be like an independent thing and something that could potentially cannibalize Cash App? At least that's the long-term plan. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, good question. So this protocol is open for anyone to use. We're not creating it for ourselves at Block only. So yes, of course, our products could make use of it. They haven't just yet, and there's been no public plans of anything of the sort. Right now, we're just really focused on making this open protocol that anyone can use, so it's not even exclusive to Block. Our competitors can use this protocol. Anyone can, and we're really focused on just that kind of game board development piece. Here's the game board. We'll figure out later how we jump in and play the game, but we think that it's really important to have this open game board for now that gives any financial institution an alternative rail to move money across borders.
All right, awesome. I guess this would be a good segue into the hackathon, since you're trying to make this available for anyone to play around with. I guess we can talk more about it. So you recently, can you give us a brief overview of the tbD hackathon and sort of what you aim to achieve with it?
Yeah, sure. So the tbD hackathon is focused on the open protocol tbDEX that we have created. So tbDEX is an open messaging protocol for financial companies, and it operates as this decentralized protocol that allows payment applications and liquidity providers to directly connect to each other to provide like near instant value transfer. So that could be your traditional currencies, that could be Bitcoin or stablecoin or cryptocurrencies and things like that. But it allows them to transfer this across borders without those typical barriers and, like I mentioned, the cost that's associated with the traditional system. So the hackathon challenges developers who live in Africa to create innovative payment applications that integrate with the protocol so that they can enable seamless financial access on a global scale. So the objective here is to gain that hands-on experience with open technologies. We're using some W3C standards in our implementation, and those standards are called decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials. And we want the participants to explore how these technologies can help establish trust in cross-border transactions.
Laolu, do you
So
okay.
So, oh yeah, well, go ahead.
clearly a lot of questions. But I get the sense that the focus here, like the core focus, is global payments. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Nosa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So, because I always, I guess, associated TBD and tbDEX with Bitcoin, but you just mentioned you could do stablecoin, basically just value of any sort.
Value of
Uh,
any sort, right? So I think that we recognize the possibilities that Bitcoin and stablecoin unlock for cross-border money movement. But we also realize that, the traditional financial institutions aren't going anywhere, right? And so our protocol gives payment companies and financial institutions a means of communicating with each other so they can transition between like your fiat and your digital currencies. But also you might just want to move from one currency to another, right? From USD to Naira, for example, right? And that's possible with this as well. The protocol doesn't really care what the currency is, but this just enables like two entities to communicate so that they can convert those currencies.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. So I guess you've I know TBD has partnered with Chipper Cash
Mm-hmm.
and Yellow Card in the
That's
last 6 to 12 months, I think, or both
right.
this year. But so like, how does this hackathon, I guess, fit into the overall strategy for like the next 12 months? Like, how does it align, or like where you guys trying to get to?
Yeah. So I guess like tbDEX has the potential to address some of the key challenges that we've learned from people on the continent, in terms of like financial inclusion, in terms of accessibility, trust in cross-border payments, right? And so, like I mentioned, the cross-border transactions in Africa are often slow and expensive. This is what people on the ground are telling us. This is what I experienced myself in attempting to send money there. And so tbDEX can really simplify and accelerate cross-border payments by facilitating that direct communication between like these financial counterparties regardless of where they are in the world. And so by reducing that reliance on these intermediaries, we should see lower transaction costs. We should see cross-border payments become more accessible to African businesses and individuals, as well as people like myself who seek to send money to the continent.
All right, awesome.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to put out a disclaimer because as Angie was speaking, I remember that we've had a couple of episodes on this podcast where we talked about like the global payments use case for cryptocurrency, and I just want to tell guys listening, like, the reason why we're paying attention and asking questions is because this is what we asked for. Not really meme coins and
Yeah.
cat images. We asked for global payments, so that's why we're polite and not clowning. So if
Oh,
we revert tomorrow to our standard, you know why. I just wanted to put that out there.
no, and I really appreciate that because we are, not about meme coins or foolishness when it comes to cryptocurrency. We see a valuable use case where people don't even need to be exposed to it, honestly. Like, for example, if I want to send you Naira, I have USD and I'm trying to make a payment to you and I want you to get that in Naira. That's one way where cryptocurrency can play in the background, where the payment application can take that money. They can basically on ramp it to something like a stable coin and move it to Naira, within the matter of seconds. And so that's our use case.
Yeah, and it's really exciting use case because, I mean, like you said, global payments are broken. I know there are a couple of people who have tried their hands at a number of things that it hasn't really delivered in the way that we've been looking to. So for context, Nigeria has instant payments. We've had it for a really long time. I send money to Furo, she gets it, excuse me, literally within seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
the thinking for us is global payments has to be that way, right?
That's right.
Because everything else is literally on demand. Entertainment, social media, how we connect with people is like near instant, and money has to be the same way. But I guess, and forgive me for taking a step back away from the
It's okay.
hackathon, um, but yeah, I want to hear a bit more about the identity side, because the first time I heard about TBD, it was in the context of like global.
Verifiable credential.
Yes, thank you for that. For that term. But yeah, that was the original context, and now I'm getting the sense of like, yeah, it's still related, but with more focus on like identity for payment. So how does that connect?
Yeah, great question. So, that's one of the challenges and why like global payments is broken is because of that identity piece. We're missing like an identity layer on the web if we really think about it. Every time you create a new account with an app, you have to start over, like give them your name, maybe make a little login and all of this. So every app has its own version of your identity, and we're kind of missing like one that you can use across the web. And so that makes it really difficult when we're talking about multiple financial institutions operating with one another and basically trying to prove who you are online. Like, think about anything online when it has to do with verifying identity. Like, I have to take pictures of my ID and upload it. Like, that's really ridiculous, right? And so with cross border payments and remittances, like, we know that one of the problems that we have to solve in order for this to work is the identity verification of the customers that you're serving, as well as fulfilling the regulatory and the compliance obligations. And so both of these are complicated in and of itself, and they really get complicated when we start talking about doing it in a decentralized fashion. So we're using open W3C standards. So W3C is basically the open standards body that governs the World Wide Web and makes the standards and protocols that empower the web. And so these two technologies are one of their standards, or two of their standards. Decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and both of these provide a way for financial institutions to convey information about counterparty trust, about exchange rates, other key information that's needed to facilitate payments. And so that's how those things work. For example, every country has its own regulations, its own laws that they have to comply with. And so if you're talking about moving money across these borders, you have to comply with all of these rules where you're moving it to, from and to. And so these companies are able to use these technologies to essentially codify what their requirements are so that they can do business with customers who may not live in the same country that they're serving.
So I guess my next question is, considering this is a highly regulated space,
Yeah.
what is the barrier to entry for like participants? Because you mentioned liquidity providers, you mentioned like payment apps. Because one big reason why cross-border payment is challenging is like you mentioned, it's the KYC piece. There's the potential. I mean, there's always the AML risk and all of that.
That's right.
So what kind of participants can partake in the protocol? And how do you filter? Like, how do you at least add some, because there's a battle between being open and being regulated, for lack of a better term. So how do you ensure it's only the right people that participate in the network?
Yes. And that's a great question. And so for the end user, right, I don't really want to have to worry about all of this. And they don't need to understand these technologies or these standards or anything like that. this is the stuff that the financial companies will need to take on. And they already do. They already have, compliance officers. They already know exactly how to do KYC because they do it right now. And so what this allows them to do is to publicly publish any like a menu of services, if you will, any currencies that they provide. So let's say that I'm a financial institution and I say, yeah, I do USD to Naira, I do Naira to CD, you specify what currency swaps that you have available. And then on that same menu, you can also specify, okay, in order to do USD to Naira, here are the requirements that the customer must meet. Like I have to have done KYC on them, these sorts of things, right? And if you haven't done that, then you're basically taken to that financial institution's portal where they already do identity verification. And once they do this KYC on you, then they can issue you a verifiable credential. Now you might say, like, why do we need all of that? It seems like an extra step. Well, the protocol allows any payment application to connect with any liquidity provider, granted that they have both implemented the protocol, right? So what this means is that a financial institution can have a presence in maybe hundreds of wallet apps, for example, and they're in the background, so they're not exposed to the end user. But if I use, let's say, wallet app A to send money to Mexico, right? And I've used some liquidity provider in the background. I don't know that, but they've done KYC on me and they've issued me a credential. When I use wallet app B and I'm using that same liquidity provider in the background, they don't want to do KYC on me again, and I surely don't want to go and fill out another form. So that's where I can present this credential, or my wallet app can do it on my behalf, present that credential back to that liquidity provider to say, hey, you already know her. You've done KYC on her before.
Right. I would just like to segue into the fun part for the participants. So we're talking about all this liquidity and money moving around. So for the hackathon participants, what do the prizes look like?
Yes. So for the prizes, we have a prize pool of 30,000 US dollars, which we'll award in Bitcoin. So the first place winner will receive $15,000 in Bitcoin. The second place will receive $10,000, and the third place will receive $5,000. And also the finalists will all receive tickets to the Africa Bitcoin Conference that's in Nairobi, Kenya. If they don't already live in Nairobi, then we will provide the means for them to travel there and take care of their hotel stay and things like that as well. So yeah, it's pretty exciting prizes, and we're looking forward to meeting the participants.
Okay, that's awesome. And because I'm sure the payments will not be delayed and they will not be slow, considering the organization involved. All right, awesome. In terms of the participants again, what criteria are you looking at when you're qualifying participants in the hackathon?
Yeah, so they essentially need to be a resident of Africa. They need to be over the age of 18. If anyone meets those requirements and interested in trying their hands at building a payment application, then we do invite them to register at tbDEX, that's tbDEX.io/hackathon.
Okay, awesome. That's pretty straightforward. So you need to live somewhere on the continent,
And be
and
over 18.
you are pretty
Yes.
much
Obviously, you have to
all
be
right.
able to
That's
write code. I assume.
Well, actually, so we allow people to form teams of two. And so we are seeing some people where one of the people writes code, but maybe they brought in a product person or a business person to really help them shape up like the idea and stuff. So you don't have to write code. Somebody on the team should have to write code, but
Got it.
everyone doesn't have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any like specific frameworks that are allowed, or it's just bring anything, write anything rather?
Yeah, so we have implemented the tbDEX protocol in TypeScript, in Kotlin, and in Swift. So that enables desktop applications, iOS applications, and Android applications. So the hackathon participants are able to use these libraries in order to develop their app.
Yeah. Got it. And it's again form a two-man team.
Yeah.
All right. And then I guess post hackathon, are there like plans that TBD is considering in terms of working with the projects that make it to the top three, perhaps? Like, or does it just end at the hackathon?
Yeah, so we have an incubation program for startups that are seeking to use like our open source projects to build their businesses. So there's a couple of businesses that are already a part of it. And with this, the TBD staff provides like a bit of consultation for them to help them get their project off the ground, you know. And then as far as the prizes for the winners, they're free to do whatever they like with their winnings, but we do hope that they use it to productize their application.
All right, that's awesome.
So beyond the prizes, what kind of support is TBD offering winners?
Yeah, so that's the incubation program I just mentioned. So we
Okay.
provide like consultation. We have like regular meetings with these companies, if they choose to. This is not uh you know this is not something that they have to do, but if they are interested in actually productizing their application, then we do have this incubation program.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that, Angie. Any other questions, Laolu, Nosa?
Yeah. Not hackathon related and not a question. But as you were speaking earlier, Angie, I was thinking it looks like there is a potential application for tbDEX in like the trade space. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with Trade Lens. I'm not sure if it's live, but there was an idea a couple of years ago to use blockchain for like global trade, because global trade is, if you're familiar, notoriously document forward and built entirely on like sovereign trust in some cases,
Mm.
supplier and importer trust. Are there like any trade use cases being looked at that you can talk about, or what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, so this protocol can definitely be extended for that sort of use case. It's not what we're focused on because we are really laser focused on
Fair
just the
enough.
cross-border payment and remittances scenarios. But we realized, and we even wrote it in our white paper, that this is all open source, which means anyone can, like I say, make a copy of our project and tweak it forever, whatever they want to do, right? So you can remove the currency swapping aspect and replace that with supply chain scenarios, right? And as I talk with people on the ground in different various countries, I see them perk up at the thought of that, right? So TBD itself is not focused on that, but again, this is all open source, and people can utilize it for whatever scenarios they dream up. There was one pharmacist that we spoke with, and we did a live stream with him. And he talked about how they use things like verifiable credentials and stuff to basically trade medicinal drugs between pharmacists. And the verifiable credentials help them identify actually licensed pharmacists, right? So that they can trade these products with. And so that would be a really cool use case for tbDEX as well, where it's not currencies you're trading, but it could be these pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And forgive me, but for some reason I don't seem to recall if this question has been answered. But are there like any live use cases out there, from like independent developers that you can talk about? Like any projects that excite you that built on your protocol?
Yeah, so we released the tbDEX protocol in April, and so we're starting to see the companies like Yellow Card and Chipper Cash come online. But there's also a project that's in our incubation program that I think is really exciting called TB Lend. And they are focused on a lending use case where they'll be able to use these technologies to kind of reframe the credit scores and lendings. And they recognize how biased these systems are, and they want to kind of switch it up a bit and use other metrics in order to allow people to borrow money. And so that's a really cool use case that I think is definitely in the line of what we stand for at tbD, which is economic empowerment.
Actually, I feel like I might be taking us back again. So, because I guess I'm just very, very curious in terms of like the protocol. So like Square manages, well, not Square, Block or tbD manages the protocol in terms of standards, in terms of use. But you don't decide who gets to access it, right? That's open for
That's
everyone.
right. That's right. Go ahead.
So, are there like any checks and balances so it's the right people that have access to it, or that's not something that you tbD wants to do?
Yeah, great question. So, we don't claim ownership over the protocol. We view it as permissionless, meaning you don't need to call us to use it. Anybody can use it. But as you're alluding to, that means anyone can use it, including bad actors. And so we do recognize that, and we are currently focused on a trust working group. And so this is comprised of not just folks at tbD, but other businesses that, care about this sort of thing. And they're included in this working group to think about like a trust framework. How can I trust that a liquidity provider is valid? And I'm sure like verifiable credentials and things can come into play there. Right now, the use of verifiable credentials within the protocol is basically for the end user and making sure that you trust them. But hey, I want to also know that I can trust these liquidity providers, especially when we make it so simple for payment applications to connect to any liquidity provider. They need a way to be able to determine that this liquidity provider is a valid one, that they're not scamming people and things like that. And so that work is being done out in the open as well, the trust framework that we are considering. So we hope to see some solutions presented soon.
So is this something that you'll be open for, I guess, in the hackathon? Like someone can bring a proposal for that?
Oh yeah, so that's one of the questions we asked them to consider is how do you basically determine that you trust these liquidity providers, and how can you continuously monitor that? And so One way that we have, because we provide a lot of resources to the hackathon participants, including example implementations, and one of the ways we show that is like using a rating system. Like, and this is relatively simple to do. Is, every time your customers finish a transaction, you ask them to rate it. Maybe 1 to 5, or star ratings and things like that, and you can aggregate these ratings for a specific liquidity provider, on your own server, and determine, like, if someone is always getting low ratings, then maybe you want to remove that liquidity provider from your app.
Nosa?
Oh, yeah, that's clear. That's clear.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Laolu, you want to say something?
Yeah, my final question is, what does the winning application look like? If you could just give potential applicants like a sneak peek into like what they should be doing, how should they approach the questions, um, what are you guys going to take into consideration when selecting the winner of the hackathon?
Mm, mm.
Don't say I never do
Yeah.
anything for you guys.
So our judges, we have a very diverse panel of judges that includes software developers, of course, but also product managers, as well as members from like our compliance and policy team. So we're going to be evaluating the projects from different angles. Of course, looking at how it was built technically, but also how the teams address things like profitability, right? How is your app going to make money? How do you look at optionality, for example? So I can have two liquidity providers that offer the same currency swap. How do I present that to my customers? Do I present them like with two options? Do I choose in the background on their behalf based on, which one is faster or which one has lower fees, or do I just show them and let them make the choice, right? We're going to look at the customer management. So we're talking about like these identities and credentials and things like that. How is your app going to manage these things? And then also that customer satisfaction part I talked about. So one way is to do a rating system. People might have other creative ideas around that as well. How are you going to monitor the customer satisfaction, right? And then for the final round, we'll also have the CEO of tbD as well as the CEO of Yellow Card on the panel. And as we mentioned earlier, Yellow Card is the first financial institution integrating with tbDEX. So I'm sure that Chris Maurice, who is the CEO of Yellow Card, will be looking at this from a potential app that can integrate with Yellow Card.
Yeah, sounds really cool.
So, what's the timelines? I guess when can people apply? When do applications close?
Yes,
Oh,
great question. Okay, so the hackathon is open right now through September 15th. So by September 15th, people need to submit their projects. At that point, our panel of judges will select a group of semifinalists. And then the semifinalists will have 2 weeks to make a short video explaining the various features of their project. So you don't just have to have the code, you get an opportunity to actually talk about it. And then from there, the judges will select 6 teams of finalists. And like I mentioned, those finalists will win a trip to Nairobi, Kenya, to attend the Africa Bitcoin conference. And then at the conference, the finalists will pitch their projects in person to the judges, and the top 3 teams will win the prizes.
All right. Awesome. I guess to our listeners, I'll say share with your network. There's lots of money on the table, and there's also lots of opportunity to build something that could be useful to the larger ecosystem. Any final comments?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the hackathon and, the opportunity it's providing for developers to create solutions that not only meet the needs of today's users, but also anticipates and addresses like the challenges of the future. And we believe that, people who are on the ground and, local to these problems are the best ones to come up with the innovative solutions for their communities. And so we're really excited about, just having these open source tools available to them and watching what they're able to produce.
All right, awesome. Laolu, Nosa, any final thoughts to add?
I think my network died at some point and I was crying out for help. I don't know how much of that you guys heard. But yeah, no other questions from me. I'll be looking out for this. Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah,
And just a reminder. Okay,
yeah,
Nosa,
no
go
questions
ahead.
from me too.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, no
All right,
questions from
so
me
as
either.
a reminder for people that want to apply, it's at tbDEX.io and /hackathon and to get all the information as well as register for the hackathon. So I believe we've come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Angie, for joining us on this episode, and we look forward to seeing how what the outcomes of the hackathon.
Thank you
All
for
right,
having
awesome.
me.